Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor with Retail Insider. Joining me today is Kimberly Lee Minor, who is President of the Women of Color Retail Alliance and also CEO of Bumbershoot, and Lisa Amlani, who is Principal and Founder of The Merchant Life and a board member of the Alliance. Thank you both for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Mario.
Thank you for having us.
All right, let's start with the Alliance, Women of Color Retail Alliance. Tell me what it is and what it does.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. So what it is a nonprofit that focuses on a few different things in the retail industry, but it's really about creating opportunity and pipeline to leadership for women of color. And when I say women of color, often people think in terms of black and white, but it's really women of color. And the foundation for this organization are some of the metrics I'll share with you now. So women make up almost 80% of the retail workforce in 2022, according to NRF. They make up 29% of leadership in retail, and leadership is considered VP, executive, C-suite. Black women are 1.5% of that number. Latinas are 1.6% of that number, and Asians are 0.8%. That is a problem. And so I took it upon myself and talked to some other women who are in this industry, and we've all achieved a level of leadership that most have not, when you think of just the 1.5%. And so I said, we have to change it. I have been a proponent of going in and never leaving anything the way it was when I got there. And I mean that for the retail industry. I've spent my career there, and I'm lucky enough to be acquainted with incredible women like Lisa, whose passion is aligned directly with mine and making a difference for us, but also for, even more importantly, for those who are coming behind us.
Kimberly, when did you start this, by the way?
Well, quite honestly, this iteration started in 20. I tried to do this in 2008, Mario, when the numbers were a little different. You know, I was a vice president with Ann Taylor Loft, and it wasn't until then that I really started to feel the isolation, and I just started to feel differently about the industry and about how it would affect me. And I looked up some numbers and I reached out to people I knew, but LinkedIn wasn't around. And I planned a dinner for Market Week because I was in New York City. I was like, oh, everybody has to be here. And 6 people showed up, and 3 of them were men. And they laughed at me. They were like, you silly little girl, right? Like, you know, we've been in this longer than you have. And there aren't many of us. Like, I think you think there are more out there. And I said, well, that's a problem, isn't it? Like, it's a problem. Why aren't there more? We all shop. Like, I don't get it. And but then I had babies, and I was trying to work and a lot of other things, and it kind of fell off, especially because there were only 6, and not everybody was really as passionate about it as I was. And so in 20, we kicked off in earnest. And since then, September of 20, we have close to 1,000 women who have either benefited from our programming, you know, supported us in some way, are actively active on LinkedIn and come to our events, reach out to us for help and sponsorship and understanding. So I'm really excited, and we just keep growing. It's really exciting.
Lisa, can you jump in and tell me about your connection here and why you got involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Kimberly said earlier, you know, what I've been through and what I want for future retailers and future women of color is aligned with the WOCRA, Women of Color Retail Alliance initiative. And, you know, the one thing I will say is, being a former merchant, it was quite apparent that there weren't a lot of people that looked like me, let alone women that looked like me, especially in leadership, and especially as we would move up the leadership ranks. And I think what I, really, I guess I couldn't get a handle on was, if our customer is diverse and dynamic and ever evolving, retail leadership teams are stagnant and they're not moving in that direction. And what we know is that it makes business sense to also have diverse retail leaders, diverse merchants, diverse product creators, because that is what the customer is.
Yeah, exactly. So what kind of things does the Alliance do? Like what kind of initiatives, events, that type of stuff is out there for people?
So we do quite a few things, even though we're small. We are mighty. So it's starting in September of 20. We started a program called Lunch and Learns, My Leadership Journey. And the third Friday of every month, we had a new leader, a woman of color, who told her story. Because what we were finding is that the average tenure for people, for the women who were interested in this group, about 10 to 12 years, and they had been stuck for like the last 5 years. And so we had leaders who come in, and you have access to people who you might not otherwise have access to ask any questions, to hear their journey. And it's not a straight shot, right? It's very different than our non-women of color journeys.
Okay.
The sponsorship is not there. How do you get recognized? So we do that. We also have a training program, and it's called Straight No Chaser and Become the CEO of Your Career. And it's a 4-part series where we talk to the women of color. How do you take feedback? How do you give feedback? What does this mean? How do you show up with executive presence? What are the important elements of running a business that make you stand out? And so we do that training. We also go into the organizations and we work with the ELT. We do panel discussions. We answer questions. We talk to recruiters, and we partner. We're very strategic in our partnership. So we've partnered with Style Careers to make sure that access is out there for everyone who's looking for it. We do networking events. We partner with retailers, and we do networking events. And we're looking to get into advocacy and really work closer with recruiters, so that, and business leaders, because those are the ones who are creating the pipeline of talent, and then the business leaders are the ones who are hiring. And so how do we help them overcome those biases and isms that are preventing more women of color from moving into these leadership positions?
So Lisa, when you look at today and in the retail industry compared to what it was when, say, you first entered, do you think, regarding this issue, do you think it's changed much in that time?
No, I would say not much has changed. Since I started in the retail corporate offices, whether it was in buying or design, in the year 2000, I'd say when I go into working with market leaders today and brands today, I see the same thing. I'll see a lot of women of color, people of color in the lower level roles. And then as you go up, we just see this like triangle. So, that tells us that not much has changed. And I think that when we think about that change, the things that need to change are things like culture, because what we do know is that people hire their own. And, it may not be on purpose, but it's definitely at a comfort level. And I think that, Kimberly brought up a good point around pipeline. If we're recruiting from the same place, we're going to get the same types of people. And what we need to do is not only inform students, folks in, communities that maybe are marginalized, that these roles exist in fashion and retail, because a lot of folks don't know that the roles even exist. And when we're within those organizations, we don't know what is possible because we don't know we have access to these leadership roles.
Kimberly, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, such a good point. If and I know this sounds really trite, but if you don't see it, you don't know you can be it. Like that is really the truth. And, you know, when we just look at LinkedIn, it's either the same 3 people who are on everything, or there's just no reflection. So even today, and I'm going to call them out because I'm really not happy, but today, Commerce Next posted their women in retail leadership, right? Like they were highlighting these women. They're so excited about this panel. It's, you know, the women in retail leadership. They all looked alike. They all looked alike. And I was like, this is the stuff that sets my head on fire, because there are women of color in retail leadership. But if you don't see it, you don't know it exists, you don't pursue it, or you get in and you're like, oh, who do I look to? You know, and I think it's a disservice that we're doing, because retail touches everyone. Everyone. Right. And there's a business, you know, there's a business advantage to really understanding who your customer is and not assuming that it's just who you are. And to Lisa's point, if we're pulling from the same cup, if we're pouring from the same cup, it's all water. Like there's nothing different. You know, you don't put your hot chocolate in the same cup you have your glass, you have your water in, or your orange juice. Like they're all different, but you want all of them to have a great buffet of beverages. You know, it's like, I don't understand why it's so hard. I don't.
So Lisa, what needs to be done? What does the retail industry need to do now to start making the change in this?
I think that brands and retailers need to take a good look at themselves. And I also think that a level of transparency is in order. How are we recruiting? What are we doing to drive change? What are we doing to drive an inclusive culture? And, you know, just blast some people and how they're doing things, because like I said, it makes business sense, but it also makes sense, you know, that we start to diversify our workforce at the leadership level. You know, there are lots of stats, and I think we have them, where more women of color leaders, more women leaders left leadership roles than ever before during the pandemic, especially last year. And imagine what that translates into as who's leaving of color, women of color. When they don't represent those roles, then, you know, we're going to have fewer and fewer people wanting those roles that are women of color.
Yeah, exactly. And Kimberly, your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with that. And I unfortunately, I think what it showed was that women got to the place where they were like, I'm not putting up with this, I'm leaving. Unfortunately, women of color, because of all the other isms that exist with pay and, you know, the ability, because women of color exponentially represent the front line, they didn't necessarily have the freedom to make those changes, right? And so it creates this almost this bottleneck of underemployment, right? So if we're looking at, you know, economic empowerment, if we're all of, you know, economic empowerment, you know, just empowerment, a reflection of the consumer, you know, how do you grow your brand? All of that goes into this. And the other thing that I think is really important to understand, because we see this repeatedly, is the thought that because this is an organization that's focused on women of color, it is a FUBU situation. It is not a FUBU situation. It is not for us, by us, because that is not enough to make this actually happen and to make the changes. You see, I am a woman of color, and it means a lot to me. And our board is so beautifully diverse, right? Like we're all women, but we're all women, right? And we're all committed to this, because if we don't have allies and we don't have people who are sitting at the door that we can educate on why they need to move over and open the pathway, then this is for naught. And it isn't for naught, because we know how important retail is to everyone. But
Mhm.
but this initiative, these changes, they also need to be important to everyone. I was talking to someone earlier today about the Crown Act and how it took advocacy and leadership to get those laws on the books in several states, and they're still working on it, so that women, Black women, could wear their hair any way they wanted to, because that was a thing, right? That was a thing that was preventing them from getting forward. Well, now we have other things, right? And what are those things? And that's what Lisa and the other board members and myself are focused on uncovering. Let's pop the lid and let's see what are the real challenges that are getting in the way. I hate to think it's just, racism, right? Like, it has to be more than that. But we all have to work together to do that deep dive and to figure out what are the actual steps beyond the work that we're doing that we can lead to really make a change. Because 3% is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think training has a lot to do with it as well at each level as you move up.
Yeah.
What do we need? This from skills to knowledge to education to set women of color up for success. Because I will tell you, in my case, and in, I would say 99% of the people that I know in merchandising and product creation, in order to move up, we would leave roles and then go somewhere else so that we would get a pay rise, so that we would get opportunity. And that shouldn't be the case. If we love a brand, because this is why we're usually within the product space, is that we love a brand. And, we believe in the brand and we're brand ambassadors, because if we're product creators, if we're merchandisers, we love product.
Yeah.
So, we want to be in inclusive environments. We want to be with brands that we truly love. And the fact is, sometimes we're backed into a corner and we have to move on. Not necessarily the best way forward. And I'll tell you, we hosted an event last week at Victoria's Secret, and I can't tell you every single person that came up to me, just me, and just saying that how my story resonated. And what happened to me was 20-something years ago, where I was told I didn't belong. That's still happening today. That's a problem.
Yeah.
That is a big, big problem. And lack of access, with the training, when you're in a job, if your focus is on that job, you learn how to do that job. If you don't have opportunity to see what the bigger picture is, or access to certain meetings and certain people to see how you can apply those skills that you've been fine-tuning on that job, then you get stuck. And that's and you get extra projects, but you don't get to move forward. And that's what we're seeing repeatedly. And then people start to feel like they're less valuable. And then they feel less confident. And then a lot of companies, unfortunately, and I've seen it, they use that to keep you down, because they kind of play a mind game with you and say, oh, well, you need a certain level of confidence to present at that level, but you've taken that from me. So that's the training. And that's the, I guess, the soft skills that we provide to let people know, hey, it's probably time for you to move on. It's not you, but let's help you build up that tool belt.
Okay. Well, thank you both for joining us today. It was a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mario.
Well, thank you, Mario. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And that was Kimberly Lee Minor, who is president of Women of Color Retail Alliance and CEO of Bumbershoot, and Lisa Amlami, who is principal and founder of The Merchant Life and also a board member of the Alliance. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, senior news editor with Retail Insider.